If you watch my videos lately, you probably realize that I've been playing a lot of Lord of the Rings, the card game, and covering several of its expansions in my videos. The reason is that I realized that there's a lot of material in the base game, which is pretty much a modern classic. It has been very successful in the last couple of years, but there is very little material for the expansions, especially among video reviewers. So if you want to have a video coverage of some of these expansions before you decide whether or not an expansion is for you, well, I'm creating the content right now. Now, in my previous videos, I covered several of the deluxe expansions, standalone scenarios, that kind of things. But what I hadn't covered yet is the saga expansions. Saga expansions are set not just in the world of Lord of the Rings. Every expansion in this game is set in that world, but actually it is the saga expansions represent the main story. In the other expansions, you live a story, you live an adventure which is set in that world. Here you have adventures that actually retrace the steps of the story. And this is the first one that tells you about the beginning of The Lord of the Rings, the early episodes in the main story, with Frodo and other hobbits that are traveling across the land and trying to reach Rivendell, and as they do so, well, they're trying to figure out a way of destroying the ring. As they do so, they are pursued by the Black Riders, hence the name of the expansion, the Black Riders. And in future videos, I'll keep covering deluxe expansions, but also cover the saga expansions. The saga expansions feature several unique aspects that you do not have in the deluxe expansions, mainly to try precisely to capture the specific themes of the Lord of the Rings, the plot, not just the world, but also to give you a sense of the continuity of a long campaign. If you play them in order and you follow certain rules that are explained in the Black Riders, then you can link all of the saga expansions in a retelling of the whole The Lord of the Rings. To do so, you have some specific cards that tell you, well, how to do so, that tell you certain procedures to follow to link the scenarios. You have cards that you acquire at the end of the scenario. They may be good things. For example, these are cards that you can attach to your heroes, and they give them extra capabilities as your heroes gain new abilities, gain new skills. There may also be burdens, such as this card here. So it can be negative cards or positive cards that you have to keep track of. That is the point. You can play all of the scenarios in the Black Riders or in any of the saga expansions individually, but if you want to link them, if you want the game to have a memory, of course, you need to keep track of the cards that have been added or removed from one game to the other, so that when you set up the next game, you're taking into account the developments that occurred in the previous games, in the previous chapters of the saga, and that's how you create the overall narrative. Of course, we also need a ring bearer, and we have Frodo here. The ring bearer comes with this new resource here that can be used to purchase cards that have this symbol here, or in any case, the resources that go on the ring bearer hero can be used to purchase neutral cards. The ring bearer, of course, also has a ring card, and if the one ring leaves play, the players lose the game. The point is precisely to protect the ring for long enough until you figure out a way of destroying it. And you know the story. When you are worrying about the Black Riders, it's the destruction of the ring is still pretty far. There's a lot of work to do. Cards that the heroes control, they can use in their decks. As you can expect, given to the theme, this expansion adds a lot of Hobbit cards. That's most of what you have. And actually, just try to stay loyal to the theme, I created a Hobbit deck using some of the cards that I found in this expansion, some other Hobbit themed cards from other expansions, and then some cards that I had laying around. Overall, I didn't put that much work in it, frankly. I just wanted to have a thematic deck with some Hobbit flavor in it. And it's not a very strong deck, but when I play the game solo, I use two decks. I pair it with another stronger deck, so I still have the sense of the Hobbit party that is doing what it can, which is not all that much, and a stronger party that is acting as the bodyguards. But in any case, you do not have to do so. You can simply have Frodo being escorted by buff, tough guys that come from other expansions, anything you want can be done. But having a thematic deck with hobbits, with lots of hobbit stuff, a thematic that is not all that strong, adds to the flavor, adds to the story, and actually, of course, adds to the challenge precisely because it is harder to play than the game becomes harder to play than if you were only use perfectly optimized decks. To cover some of the Hobbit themed cards that you find in this expansion, so we have Hobbit Heroes. Oh, by the way, this is the symbol of this expansion here. Oopsie, here we go. We have Hero Hobbits with this symbol here. Well, this comes from another expansion. Here we go. Pippin comes from the Black Riders, and you can read the text. These are encounters abilities that also come from this expansion. This one allows you to add to the engagement cost of the enemies, simulating the attempts for your heroes to sneak past the Black Riders to avoid contact with them. We have a card that really can be used, has an ability that makes sense only if you only have Hobbit Heroes. Other than that, it's not all that great. The pony, no, the pony doesn't come from this expansion, it comes from another one. As you can see, I have a deck where I simply store the Hobbit cards that I'm not using. This is the Hobbit deck with the ones that I'm actively using right now. These two cards, I don't know, maybe they're good, but they work together, and pretty much for them to be worth, you need to have both of them in play, so it seems like a lot to commit to. This one allows you to draw a card after you reduce your threat, so you need that to work together with other cards that give you that effect. And what comes in this expansion, what is Hobbit themed, that allows you to reduce threats, so pretty much to take advantage of this card, this is a card here that allows you to reduce your threat by 1 for each pipe you control. It's almost like a catch-22. For this one to make sense, you need to have this one, and for this one to be useful, you need to have that one. And then each hero with a pipe attachment gets +1 until the end of the phase. Lots to commit to. I haven't used these cards. Now, the Hobbit cards that I'm actually using, I actually used when I was playing the Black Riders. Sam's a nice guy, and this is a nice card. Good wisdom trait, good wisdom stat. And also, after you engage with an enemy that has a high engagement cost than your threat, then you ready him so he can go questing and then still participate to the attack. And he gets a bonus for doing so. Mary has this icon here, and doesn't look very strong when it comes to combat, but gets +1 combat for each Hobbit hero that you control. And I placed this hero here together, pretty much escorting the Hobbit heroes, because the symbol is this symbol here, but also when this hero is engaged, gains this other resource here. So this would allow me to buy some more expensive cards with this icon here than I would have been able if I only had this hero in play, generating resources of that kind. Oh, this is the new resource, the resource of the Ring Bearer, and this is the only card that comes in this set that has that resource. And we're told with this that each hero that you control gets +1 wisdom until the end of the round, and you also draw a card for each Hobbit hero that you control. In my case, I have 3 Hobbit heroes: Frodo, Sam, Merry, and well, this is not a Hobbit hero. Hobbit Cloak comes from this set here, gives you extra defense. Oh, another Hobbit card. You choose a Hobbit Archer, and the card gets extra bonuses, extra advantages. Same card. Are there more things? Oh, build a pony. Pony. What a cute little pony. And you lower the cost of the pony if you control Sam. And since I do, then this becomes a free card, which is neat. A couple of other cards, but this is most of what of the Hobbit cards that I add. Oh, here we go. There's another one. Here we go. Your attached hero gets that bonus there, and that also comes from the expansion. I didn't use many cards. Oh, here's another one actually. This is neat, and pretty much to be able to put this into play, I need these two heroes to work together, otherwise it takes a long time for Mary to generate these resources. And if you time it well, this card can be powerful because after he enters play, you deal 1 damage to an enemy engaged with you. 2 if the enemy has a higher cost, and sometimes you want to engage those people. Sam lends a hand because he's because he refreshes, this character enters play, so neat stuff. But I couldn't use many of the cards, pretty much because the cards that come here, the Hobbit themed cards that come with this set, have many different symbols. So either I get a deck with 3 different resources, which is always tricky and problematic, or I need to select some of the types of resources, and so I'm only using some of the Hobbits that come with this deck. Interesting. I can't wait to also play more Saga expansions, including the sequel of this one, The Road Darkens, hoping that there will be more Hobbit stuff to strengthen my Hobbit deck. As for the adventures that come, they really retrace the steps of the main story. The first adventure, the first scenario, there are 3 scenarios. You're traveling and you are being followed by these annoying guys. You're trying to keep your profile low, but from time to time they come out of nowhere. They inflict powerful hits. Sometimes they get attachments that allow them to go back to the staging area, so they're super tricky. If you like the original story, the scenario is for you. It's an interesting, challenging scenario. You are being followed, and this is the overall theme of the expansion, as you may very well expect. You're being followed, you're being stalked, you need to move fast, destroy enemies, but mainly try to cover ground, because some of these enemies are just very powerful. You won't be able to destroy them. It's better to concentrate on moving fast towards the end of the scenario. So here we have the first scenario. You're running and trying to avoid contact with the bad guys. Then the second scenario actually is very different. The second scenario is called The Knife in the Dark, and it starts with an enemy in play, which is a spy with a very high engagement cost, and you cannot engage with that enemy voluntarily. So the guy is bound to stay there in the staging area for a long time, and that is problematic because the guy also has an effect that either makes you raise your threat at a very fast rate, or you can choose to avoid that by shuffling a Ring Wraith into the encounter deck. That card that is there in the staging area, emanating this negative aura, is a spy. So that really gives you the sense that you're doing your business, you're trying to take a break in your trip, but there's the spy that is sending information to the bad guys. So either it's giving information about your location, making it easier for the bad guys to reach you, or in any case, overall, worsening the situation for you, which is represented in that case by the fast increase of your threat level. And you have the sense that it is a spy. You see it there, but it pretty much represents the fact that you know that there is a spy, but the fact you cannot engage with the spy is like you see the effects of the action, but you can't locate, you can't identify exactly the spy. And you have to deal with that. You have to wait until pretty much the spy has created enough damage that, in a sense, is giving you enough clues to identify the location of the spy, to find the spy, and to engage with the spy. Very thematic. Very thematic, this idea of the spy, whose effects you see, but that you cannot engage directly. The third scenario is pleasantly challenging, but in structure it is overall similar to the first. You travel fast and you are followed by bad guys. And in particular here there is a super villain, which is super challenging, very tough to destroy. You cannot complete the scenario pretty much unless you eliminate the Nazguls that are following you, unless you eliminate all Nazgul enemies. Technically you can. This is the second and last card of the scenario. I'm not going to show you the other side, so you don't have too many spoilers, you don't have the exact details. Technically you can complete that, even if you're still pursued by the bad guys. That is, they're still around, but there's a penalty for doing so. The quest value of the card is increased to a point that, for intents and purposes, practically speaking, it is almost impossible to complete the scenario unless you got rid of the Nazgul enemies that are following you. very thematic, very thematic. You travel to locations to complete the scenario. You need to complete some locations. When you do complete a certain location, you're able to discard all of the Nazgul enemies that are engaged with you. It really feels thematic. It really shows, gives you the sense of you manage to reach a point where an area where you finally lost your enemies, they lost your tracks, they're not pursuing anymore, and that is what brings you victory in this scenario. Overall, interesting expansions. The cards, the resources that you have, relatively interesting, thematically interesting, and I like the fact that that present the challenge precisely because at least at this point I haven't been able to optimize them into like a very strong deck. Paradoxically, I enjoyed thematically the fact that the game was strategically harder than other games. So when I was using my decks that had been designed to be tough, it was easier for me to win scenarios. Now I'm playing thematically, and in the sense I am experiencing some of the theme. I'm experiencing the pain and fear of these heroes that are not heroes quite yet. They have just been called on an adventure which is much bigger than they ever expected anything would happen to them, and they had to deal. They're still very green heroes, and they're figuring it out. It's a strange case where a game weakness in the sense of like something makes it hard for you to win the game actually enriches the experience from the thematic point of view, which is cool, which is interesting, but you have to be in the right mood. In a certain sense, I prefer to lose a scenario with a deck that felt right thematically rather than winning a scenario with a deck that would have felt completely different from the main storyline. Because if you're interested in the saga, really, it means that you want to play the main story of The Lord of the Rings. And this expansion does a very good job. I'm interested in continuing exploring the saga expansions. I'm gonna play more in the future and cover them in my video. This is a solid beginning. We are off to a strong start. It does what it promises. This set does what it promises, that is, to retell you the story of The Lord of the Rings in a way, of course, that you can play in a playable way. It does so well. I like the ring bearer idea. I like the continuity that is created. The work that has been done here to allow you to connect the scenarios into a main storyline. So really fun, cool stuff for players of board games, of course, but also for players that are really into a Lord of the Rings, not just in variants like we have in other expansions, but in the original story. It is fun to see when the original story is retold through game mechanics, which is hard to do, and this is a case where it has been done successfully, at least for this part of the saga, at least for this first expansion.